Today, I wanted to talk to you about what it's like to be working in a Japanese company as a full-time employee, specifically from the viewpoint of a software engineer. So I'd like to highlight both the similarities and the differences between Japanese companies and those overseas. I'm from the US, so it's all going to be kind of from that viewpoint. I think there's actually going to be more similarities between Japanese companies and European companies than Japanese and US companies. It's pretty well known that the US is like a hyper-capitalistic society, and that I think is reflected in the business structure and the way people are employed there as well. I don't know how far out in the sticks I'm going here by walking on this road. Might need to go back on the main road or really get off track and never get home. Being a salaried employee here for only a little over a year and a half, I don't have an exposure to a wide range of companies, but just from my personal experience combined with like what I see on the news and just what kind of comes into my ears from how friends talk and all kinds of stuff like that. That's kind of where I'm coming from on this stuff. So to start, the rumor about companies here being, the stereotype, the rumor about companies here being like having really late working hours and stuff is true, but probably not for the reason most people would think, which is like that the boss puts a lot of pressure on them. I mean, that's certainly true in some bad companies, but a lot of that comes from societal pressure in a way, not even external pressure necessarily, but internal. From the beginning, I found myself pretty in aligned with like the Japanese way of thinking or whatever. I'm not trying to be pretentious about it. I mean, I don't think it's better or anything. It's just, for as long as I can remember, I've always been a quieter guy myself and have kind of worried about, what others around me think. Pretty stark contrast to my friends back in the US and those around me who, they were social, but I never got the impression that people were worrying about what others thought as much as I am. Coming to Japan, and there being whatever social awareness we have in the US, here in Japan, that's, in my opinion, I think that's like times 5 or something. People are just constantly thinking about what others think, which is a good thing in a way, but it also prevents bold action. I think that preventing a bold action is what leads to some really bad circumstances in companies here. Not only bold action, but just action that would go against what your superiors, your senpai, anything that could be slightly perceived as kind of going out from they would normally expect of you, that's typically avoided. If someone else is in the office late, you really don't want to leave before them. You don't want to be the first leaving every day. And so that leads to this race to the bottom where, everyone's staying later, and it just ends up that everyone stays late at night. In my case anyway, that's what it is. It's not pressure from the bosses or harassment. Oh, are you leaving already? Or stuff like that. It's just, you're thinking of everyone around you, and you don't want to be seen as the person that works the least. But this doesn't just affect working hours. This also affects business decisions. I mean, how meetings are carried out, the decisions themselves. Right? Someone that's your superior makes a questionable decision. You're not going to speak back on it. You're just kind of going to quiet. You might not have to say anything positive about it, but you won't speak up on it, and that leads to some bad decisions. Now, when I say your superior, I don't necessarily mean someone that's actually in a position of authority over you. Just anyone that's came into the job before you, even if it's only a little time. If they were there 3 months before you, they've got superiority over you. Now, obviously not as much as someone that's been there 10 years over you, and you can, I think, push back to varying degrees based on that. But how that plays out within myself is, someone that was only there a year before me, I find myself just subconsciously deferring to I could go on forever about this aspect of the Japanese workplace and its implications, but I think I'll just leave it at there, or I would literally talk forever on this. Okay, so coming from the U.S., one very different aspect of Japanese companies is that it's very difficult to get fired here, like way more difficult. I mean, in the U.S. you can just get fired for whatever reason, you know, like literally anything, as long as it's not discriminatory. You can get fired for anything, but here, work here is much more like working a government job in the U.S., where it's much more difficult to get fired. And to get fired, you would have to they would have to go through a lengthy process basically and prove that you're just not doing the work and prove that it's not health related, prove that it's not discriminatory, stuff like that. I mean, assuming you're working at a proper company, you know, as long as it's not like a black company, you know, black meaning like under the table kind of stuff, it's quite difficult if you're a seishain or a full-time employee to get fired. That's actually the main difference between what's called a seishain here and gyoumu itaku, which is like a contractor. A lot of companies will want to use contractors because, I mean, in effect, they're essentially a full-time employee, but they want to use contractors because they can actually cut them loose without going through a whole bunch of headache. In fact, you know, I know some companies that do this, that will hire you initially for 3 months as a trial period and not call you a full-time employee, and you aren't, you're free to go as you please, but they'll hire you for a trial period as a contractor and then switch you over to a full-time employee. Or they'll give you an offer to join as a full-time employee if you work with them good. That's because they know once they get you in that full-time employee status, they won't be able to shake you. I mean, really, they'll have to go through hell. They'll have to go through hell to get you out of there. Assuming they don't just, you know, make your life miserable to get you to quit, which is probably what, you know, some less reputable companies would do. The more reputable companies, and this is much more normal, but the more reputable companies, they will offer you a big amount of money to quit, you know, several months' pay. They'll offer you that and say, please quit. And if you do, good. If not, I mean, you're fighting. They're going to make your life miserable. Along with that system of being difficult to fire, kind of wading into dangerous territory by saying this maybe, but I think there's some people that abuse that system, not coming into work for like months at a time. I know personally of a few people that are like this. I don't want to downplay anybody that has actual sickness that needs to be away for months. But just with companies I have experience with, I mean, they're not very big companies, but there will be several employees that are like apparently sick enough for months at a time. And then when they come in, they look fine, you know, and I know it's not all looks. That's why I'm saying I'm trying to be careful, because I know there's some people with, you know, actual needs, but it's just like a strangely large percentage of people that do that. And you can get partial pay. You can't get full, or you usually don't get full pay, but you'll get partial pay and you'll be off for months and they can't fire you. I don't know if I should say that because I don't want to throw people that are actually sick under the bus, but it's just, you know, if in the US, like, you're not advocating for this, but in the US, if you were sick and you couldn't come to work for months at a time, I mean, you'd be fired. And I think most people would say that's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of reasonable, and then the job would be passed to the government, right, to pay your disability, or yeah, I guess it would be disability, right? The government would pay that, but here you're just stuck on the company's dime. This is my understanding of things anyway, so I might be off a bit, but in general, I think this is kind of how things work. And I don't think that would go on forever, you know? I don't think the company would have to pay forever, but for extended periods of time, let's say they would have to pay. So I've talked about the aspect of getting fired. So what about getting hired here in Japan? Well, from my experience in the US, when you get out of college, from my experience, people I know, getting out of college, it's not necessarily easy to get a job, because unless you did internships and stuff, because you don't have experience. Like, who's going to hire me with no experience? And you're going to have to prove yourself or get lucky. But here, a lot of people, there's a big culture of companies just hiring graduates directly. not sight unseen, but just do an interview and like, okay, I'm graduating from so-and-so university. Okay, we'll take you. It's called Shinsotu, is like new graduates. Susayo is like new graduate hiring. And a lot of companies will do that, just hire dozens of employees at a time. I mean, if they're big companies. Frankly, it doesn't really matter what you even studied a lot of the times. I mean, you could be getting a degree in one thing and, I mean, literally completely different job, but still hire. I know a lot of people that are software engineers that didn't study software engineering at college. They just got hired as a new grad. I mean, you're working for dirt pay, but they'll take you. That's a big difference. At least tech in the U.S., I think lately it's becoming more of a meritocracy in the sense that, if you have a bunch of qualifications, you got a really nice degree or doctorate or whatever, you're probably going to get the job. But here it's more system. It's more of a, just hiring based on personality and if that person seems like they're going to fit in. And it's kind of bad because, if you, in your interview as a new graduate, you present to someone that's really reserved and really, willing to submit to the company, then you're more likely to get hired, right? So that just contributes to that reserved culture that we were talking about earlier. So what is pay like within a Japanese company? Well, for almost any job you'll be doing here, the pay is going to be lower compared to the U.S. I think the pay in the U.S. is just higher to most countries in general, but still. So yeah, the pay even for software engineers here is, way lower than what you'll find in the U.S. There's a good website, I believe it's called Japan Dev, and they do a developer survey of engineers here. So if you're interested in what your pay as an engineer here could be, go check out that survey. I think they have one from 2023, and they do one every year. Can give you kind of a pretty good ballpark figure of what you can expect to make here based on your level of experience and everything. As a foreigner, you can negotiate your salary. Obviously, you can as a Japanese too, but it would be very unconventional. And I think you would probably not get hired, to be honest with you. This is that coffee store I was telling you about. The pancakes are pretty good though. A lot fluffier and thicker than pancakes I'm used to. It's called Hoshino coffee. As for the pay, I negotiated a way higher salary, but that's because I did that contractor thing for the first 3 months, and then I switched over. So by that time, they'd already had a bunch of time invested in me, so I negotiated my salary up quite a bit. So I recommend that actually, if you can say, let's do a trial period as a contractor for a bit. If you can pull that off, they'll have a time invested in you. It's not really a Japanese thing, that's just more of a psychology thing. They spent all that time training you, and now they would have to throw it away if they said no to your negotiations. So that's a career hack for you. I've actually done that a couple of times. Just don't try to nickel and dime them though. So another thing about salaries here as a company employee is, I should have looked up the terminology for this so I could have told you, but I completely forgot how to pronounce the terminology for this. But basically, whatever the listed yearly salary is, typically within that salary will be included your bonuses. Say, well, what is going on with that? Well, the salary they list is what they pay you total compensation basically for the year. You'll actually on a monthly basis be receiving less and then receive 2 large lump sums. It could be 1 large lump sum, but typically 2 lump sums of a lot of money throughout the year. So say if the salary, and this is a high salary, don't get me wrong, but say if the salary was listed as 80,000 USD, then there was 30,000 of bonuses. So your monthly paycheck would be based off of that 50,000, and then you would get $15,000. You would get $15,000 twice throughout the year, which is crazy coming from the U.S. It's actually really bad in my opinion because it makes planning, it makes budgeting monthly harder. I guess you could argue in one way it's good because it makes you think long term about your budget. Some people could probably benefit from that because they're not good at budgeting monthly, but then again, the same people I guess would probably just go blow that 15,000 as soon as they got it on something big like a car. They do have paid paternal leave here, when you have a child, and that is for men and women. So I'm not sure the exact amount of time, but I know you can take at least 2 months of parental leave. And I don't know if that's a law, but I know an increasing number of companies are starting to support it. So you can take advantage of that. Again, because of the internal pressure people feel to appease their coworkers or to be in harmony with their coworkers. A lot of people don't take that, especially men. I mean, obviously women have to take it to some extent, but especially the men are hesitant to take it. In fact, when one politician took it, it became news, national news, and it was being heralded as a good thing, but that just goes to show you how rare it still is, I think within the past couple of years. So, but it's definitely gaining traction. In fact, in my current company, a couple of guys took 2 months of parental leave, so it's a very good development. I could talk all day about the differences between Japanese company and US companies, but I'm running out of time because it's going to be a really long video. So if you have any questions, please let me know below, and I might make a separate video on them, or I might just comment as a reply to you. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this video. Again, it's getting way too long. I might make a part 2. So just tell me if you want that. And again, leave me any questions you have. Okay, guys, have a good day. Goodbye.